Hello, and welcome to the Ultra in Conversation with. And today I'm speaking to the aptly named Our Recollections May Vary. Hello, Recollections. Thank you for joining me.
Hello, HG. Thank you so much for having me.
You're most welcome. Now, you have a YouTube channel, which I understand from having a mooch around and looking at it, that was created back in September 2016. But as per your videos, you've only really been making them for 4 or 5 months. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. I started the
Hmm,
YouTube channel for a high school reunion thing. So I had videos on there, but it was never a channel. That was
I
just
understand.
for fun. Yeah.
Okay. Accordingly, you've been making videos primarily about this one's wife the last 4 to 5 months. What suddenly prompted you to start making those videos and why choose her?
Well, I had heard about the whole Meghan Markle and Harry thing primarily through the Amber Heard thing. I That got
Mhm.
me into it. And I knew about it, and it was kind of vaguely out there for me. It was on my radar, but nothing really important. But then about a year ago, things changed for me. My son essentially did what Harry has done. He got
Mhm.
involved with a narcissist, and through hearing, about Meghan Markle, obviously it when I saw the things happening in my personal life, I became obviously more paying more attention to what was happening and kind of studying it to see exactly, where were the signs that I missed and things like that. And kind of as a therapy is where I started the YouTube channel, because I found in the Megxit community, there aren't necessarily people that know and recognize narcissism quite the way you do when you've experienced it. And the people in the Megxit channel or Megxit community seem to have that kind of commonality amongst them. And so it was a sense of, community, I guess, that helps me to deal with everything that has happened in my family.
So the personal circumstances that what occurred with your son
Hmm.
resonated in what you were seeing that was going on between this one's wife and Harry, and
Absolutely.
that then caused you to think, "I'll make a channel talking about it, make videos talking about it."
Yes, yes. I mean, I got into it obviously before I started the channel, but I started to see things that, yeah, that it was easier to talk about it in the YouTube format, because I could see things that maybe other people didn't notice, or maybe that other people couldn't see a relation to. A lot of people wonder about how Charles doesn't do anything. And there's a lot of concern about how the Markle family feels about how Meghan has treated them. And there's a lot of stuff about how Harry has treated the royal family, but not ever really from the royal families necessarily anyone in the same position.
I see. And in relation to this one's wife, what's your view of her?
Uh, well, like everybody else, honestly, I there's the one thing that just drives me absolutely batty is when every time I see anything that deals with her, she's incapable of showing respect to anyone. And it just fascinates me watching anyone be able to go through life and with such a huge platform, and she shows no respect at all for anything.
Do you
Whether it's
understand why that is?
Well, now I do now after listening to you and being a part of the community. Yeah, I mean that's part of what it is that it's helping me to understand things more. I
What
mean,
is it? What is it then that causes her not to demonstrate that respect?
she doesn't show respect because she can't comprehend anything other than what's important to her. And because she is so focused on what is important to her, when something, say, a national anthem is being played. Well, she doesn't
Hmm.
care about what that represents to anybody around her, or what it
Hmm.
represents to who's singing it, or anything about it. All she's thinking about is, why is no one paying attention to me right now?
Okay. So, given that you understand that it's her narcissism which causes
Hmm.
her to be self absorbed, that everything about what she does is geared to the pursuit of the prime aims to control people, to draw fuel from them. So, you now know, after accessing my work, You now
Hmm.
know why it is that she doesn't show respect to other people. Yet you mentioned earlier on that this is the thing that annoys you the most. So why then does it continue to bother you if you know why she does it?
That's a good question. I guess because even though I can intellectualize and say, I know this is why she does it, it's still
Hmm.
so alien to me and to
Yeah.
my way of thinking that it's still each time it's like I come against a brick wall when I see it again. And it just infuriates me. And part of it is that I don't really understand, even though I can say I understand why she's doing it, I can't feel that. I can't put myself in her position and feel that, which I normally can do for a lot of people and a lot of things. And I can normally, sorry, it's my phone ring. I can normally put myself in their position and understand their point of view, but with her, I never can.
Okay. It infuriates you.
Hmm.
There'll be other people that would agree with you, recollections, about that being the case. They would say, yeah, she infuriates me with her stupid rictus grin. She infuriates me with the way she's always prodding Harry. She infuriates me with the way that she fails to show respect to
Hmm.
other people. Now, many people still don't get it as to
Right.
what drives her behavior, hence why I keep making the
Hmm.
videos that I do to educate people. You understand it, but you demonstrate that you have this sort of disconnect between the intellectual understanding of it and this feeling that you still get when you
Yes.
see her behaving that way. So, how about this then? Given that it infuriates you and being regularly infuriated, probably not something that you want to have in your life, why
Right.
not stop? Why not stop looking at her? Why not stop reading about her?
The main reason, well, there's two reasons actually. One reason is because even though it infuriates me, and like I said, I can still intellectualize it and I can still say I know why it's happening, but by talking about it, it does make me feel almost like I'm venting it. Like, look at this. This it infuriates me the
Yeah,
way
but
she's doing this curtsy. So
if you
by
did,
talking about
sorry
it,
to cut
then I
across
get it.
you, but if you
Yeah.
didn't keep looking, you wouldn't have to vent. So why not just stop watching her?
Right. So then that comes to the second reason. And the second reason is there is a part of me that can't get back at the woman who has hurt my family. And so a part of me does it because you know what? If I can get Meghan, then it's getting the person I can't get.
That's very honest of you. How do you how do you see that you're getting this one's wife?
Oh, if I can reveal all of the nonsense that she pulls, I just feel that this the motto of my channel is, one voice added to that of a thousand others can become a roar of discontent. And so the
Mhm.
more of us that point out what she does, eventually someone that has the ability to really put a stop to what she does, whether it's the media, whether it's, she continues, I think if she continues to go down the political road, she'll get it'll be instead of just tabloid journalists, she'll get the real journalists that are going to look at her and take her down. Something is going to have to happen to stop this woman eventually.
Well, do you think that will be the case? Do you think she'll actually something will actually stop her, or will she just trundle on?
She has to be stopped. It's not
Well,
yeah.
I understand
Yeah.
your sentiment. I understand your sentiment. She has to be stopped, but there's a
No,
difference
no,
between saying she has to and whether it'll actually happen or not.
no, what I meant by she has to be stopped is she won't stop. So some outside source is going to have to force her to stop. So I think that it could happen under certain circumstances. Like I said, if she goes into politics, then she'll get up against journalists that aren't going to benefit just from the clicks and views, like the tabloid journalists. Like I remember you did a video about a week or so ago and it was a great point that you were making that they make so much money off of her when you're talking about the
Yes.
tabloids that
Yeah.
they're not going to kill their cash cow. They're not going to take
Mm.
down, they're not going to stop those clicks and views. But if she were to get into politics, then you're talking about journalists that are going to be looking for different things. And I think
Yes.
that would be a different type of journalist that would be able to start revealing things to the greater public. The only other
Okay,
thing that,
so
yeah,
just following that thought process, and thank you for expanding on your observations and thoughts in this respect. You take on board the fact that the let's call it the non-political media basically
hmm
says we'll keep this circus going because people keep watching, they keep
hmm
reading, it's clicks, it's advertising revenue. Let's not slaughter the golden goose here. But if she ventures into the political vein, then the observation is that more serious journalists will say, right, we'll basically do hit pieces on her and we'll uncover the skeletons in the cupboard, some of which will exist, others are just rumor and don't. But you anticipate that they would find sufficient material that they would be content to expose her, and that then that would cause the public to turn against her. Is that what you would see would happen?
I do. Like, if
Hmm.
she were to get into, with the people that she currently seems to be politically leaning towards, the Kamala Harris, the Getty crew, the Newsom crew, I do see that people such as Meghan Kelly or any of the Fox News journalists, I don't think they're going to let it slide, because they would have then a vested interest in exposing things, as opposed to the tabloid journalists who don't have an interest. It does
Yes.
them no good.
Yeah. Okay. Playing devil's advocate for a moment,
hmm
let us assume that as a consequence of firm advice and her own narcissism says, whilst you have these political aspirations, don't go there. In the same way that her narcissism essentially says in that subconscious, don't go to the United Kingdom. It'll be a shit
hmm
show. You'll be booed. You'll have disapproval. So she doesn't come to the United Kingdom. She pays
Yeah.
heed to that.
hmm
Let us say that she decides, no, whilst I'd like to get into politics, it's too difficult. I'm not going to succeed. Therefore, she doesn't go down that route. So that aspect of exposure then is denied to you. The serious journalists are not going to get involved. Then it'll just trundle on, presumably.
Yes, unless some actions are taken by the royal family or by the UK government. Yeah, I think it would just trundle on. I don't think anything will be revealed, for example, about his visa, because that's another way that things could go
Mm.
downhill for them. But I don't think any of that'll be made public ever. Um, so yeah, and I don't really see the royal family or the United Kingdom doing anything as it
Mm.
stands now
Okay. Let me
with
bring
the
it back to
current
this
people.
choice. Yes. Let me bring it back to this choice again for you in terms of, because I want to talk about the situation that you've experienced in
hmm
relation to your family and narcissism. I want to address that
hmm
shortly. And you were very honest in stating part of my reason for doing this is basically I can't get at the person that's affected
hmm
my family. So I'm, in a way, transferring my anger, my frustration, and directing it towards this one's wife.
hmm
If, if I put the choice to you like this, you could get rid of your frustration and irritation in relation to this one's wife by not reading anything about her, not watching anything about her, essentially go no contact with her, cut her out
mm
of your life. And that would actually be quite easy for you to do so. Yeah, you glimpse it out of the corner of your eye when you're scrolling, but you don't click on it. You don't go
Right.
and look at YouTube videos and so on and so forth. So you discipline yourself to stop doing that. So that's route one to get her out of your life. Or the other is that you continue talking about her, you continue making videos about her, with the possibility, but no guarantee, that someday she might be sufficiently exposed that people will turn against her. The
hmm
cutting her out option is far easier and far more effective. So why not go down that route?
Because it's fun. There's also, there is also a fun aspect of it. I enjoy, for example, um, looking at the behind the scenes of what, like, if we hear that they are doing this trip to Colombia. Well, who are they visiting? Who are these people? And seeing and finding it's almost like a puzzle, finding
Yes.
the people who are behind them and who are they connected to, and where's the possible link to some sort of shady deal here or there. So I enjoy the puzzle of it, and I enjoy I also do a couple of my videos. I relate some of my videos to history. I am a historian. And
Yes.
so things like, relating and comparing Meghan to Anne Boleyn, which
Mm.
normally most people assume that Henry VIII was the narcissist, which I don't agree with. And so things like that and being able to talk about historical things is also enjoyable for me. So I get other things from it other than just her. But, that's how I got into it, but I found
Hmm.
other avenues that I enjoy also about it.
Okay, you made an interesting point there. You
Hmm.
talked about the comparison between this one's wife and Anne Boleyn. Might
Yes,
you expand? Might you expand on that for me?
sure. I mean, a lot of people assume that it's Henry VIII that is the bad guy because he's the one, he had the 6 wives and all that.
Yeah.
But if you actually were to take out the time that he had Anne Boleyn in his life, I think it's what, like 1526 to 1533, something like that. If you take those years out and you just look at him before and after, well, he's not really he doesn't really do anything that horrific. Did he cheat on his wife? Yes, he cheated on his first wife, but they were happily married for a long time.
Hmm.
And him cheating on his wife, yeah, he was a king. You know, it wasn't that unusual for the time period. Then if you
No.
look after Anne, okay, so then his wife died in childbirth, not really his fault. He divorced Anne of Cleves, and yet throughout the rest of her life, she remained in the UK. She ended up an incredibly wealthy woman, and she had
Hmm.
more status and position than she ever would have had back in Cleves. So did he treat her poorly? Well, yeah, he made up rumors about her and said she was ugly and things, but really in the end she kind of got out of it pretty easy. I mean, she was probably pretty happy not to be with him. And
Yeah.
then the next wife, yes, he did execute her, but she did cheat on him. She did commit adultery. She was the queen and she shouldn't have done that. So
Hmm.
when you look at him before and after Anne, the really horrible things that he did, if you took out those years, well, would you have said he was a monster from what happened if you take out the years he was with her? Not necessarily. He wasn't necessarily all that different from being a typical king of the time. And he had relationships. He had relationships with his family. He had a marriage for many years. He had good friends. Those are the things that a narcissist wouldn't be able to maintain as long as he did.
Yes, but then you look at his treatment, for instance, of Thomas Cromwell,
Yes.
and then you look at the uh, treatment of other individuals that he appointed, and then he had that rampant paranoia where he saw plotting against him left, right, and centre. Um, Cromwell was a favoured advisor, and then he wasn't, and he was ultimately executed. And of course, the king listened to other people because there were other people that plotted against Cromwell. But
Yes.
then consider as well Sir Thomas More, a very pious lawyer who ultimately, because he wouldn't give the king what he wanted, ended up being executed, even though he regarded him very highly. So it's interesting because you're suggesting, in a sense, that Henry wasn't such a bad chap.
He was, I mean, I'm not going to say he was an angel because he was still a king of the time period. And it,
Oh, I
what he
certainly
did,
agree. I certainly
yeah,
agree with you that one has to look at these things in context. So, for
right,
instance,
right,
you might say, well, okay, so he's a man who had various mistresses,
right,
so that shows a particular pattern of behaviour. But most monarchs did, because the idea of marriage wasn't for love.
right.
Marriage was for the purposes of a contract to preserve land, to prevent wars, to bring about
Mhm,
peace. So you married someone for political purposes, and your mistress was there for the fun stuff, basically. And
mhm,
it was accepted
right,
that the king would have mistresses. It was actually unusual if the monarch didn't. And if you happened to actually love the person that you were married to, that was a bonus. They were there
mhm,
for appearance sakes and political. So I certainly agree in regard of that. And also, of course, the whole concept of um, Henry believed that he had a direct line to God,
mhm,
and so you might argue and say, well, that's magical thinking. But set in the context at the time, there was nothing particularly unusual about thinking that the monarch could speak to God and had a direct line, because the divine right of kings, he was appointed, he was God's
Hmm.
representative on earth. So I certainly agree with putting it in a context, but
Hmm.
notwithstanding that, it's interesting to find that. So what you're essentially saying is that Anne Boleyn corrupted him in some way, caused him to behave badly. What is it? What's the threat?
I think she was
She.
manipulating him, and it, just like you have to put into context his behavior as being from the time period. In the time period when you want to get rid of an enemy, what do? You, I mean, Thomas More is a great example. Thomas More wouldn't go along with, the divorce and agreeing that Anne would become the queen. And what happened to Thomas More? Now, Thomas Cromwell, in a sense, you can also say, not unlike Catherine Howard, he wasn't. He was pretty corrupt too, and yes, he was one of Henry's closest advisors. And I do think, yeah, you make a good point that he did do that after Anne was out of his life. But
Mhm.
I would also say that there was a part that considered Thomas Cromwell a remnant of the Anne saga to Henry, in that he was the one that was pushing and conniving along the path that Henry wanted when he wanted Anne.
Mhm.
And getting rid of her, he got rid of the remnants of her as well.
I mean, it's interesting that you mention this about Anne Boleyn, because generally people do regard her as some kind of harlot that came along,
Mm,
and she was a bit of a scoundrel. And then a view shifted, whereby actually it was a case of she was more sinned against than sinned. For instance, the
right.
allegations of incestuous behaviour with her brother was trumped up as for the purposes of having basically a fixed trial against her and so
Hmm.
forth. And many people have turned around and said, actually, she was a victim of the political aspirations of other people, and she didn't actually cause any problems. But you see her as a manipulative individual, which is naturally what this one's wife is. So it's interesting you make that comparison, and thus the suggestion is that Henry VIII wasn't quite as bad as he's been portrayed. So that brings me to this point then. Given that you see the comparison between the two women, and that it was actually Anne Boleyn that was manipulating Henry VIII,
Hmm.
what's your view of Harry?
Oh well, I he's definitely manipulated. I honestly struggle sometimes these days to look at him. I mean, the man looks like a shell of himself. I do
Mm,
think that he is in a relationship where he is controlled, he's emotionally abused, at least. The control that she does with the claw and all that, the way she directs him to do things, that I don't even know if he even thinks about it anymore. It's so second nature to him.
yeah,
And
I see.
and if you think about, speaking of Henry and the comparison or such, from how many people in your experience that were victims of narcissists who, if they were king and they could execute people, wouldn't get rid of the narcissist in that way? Not that anyone would these days, but a lot of them would have that sentiment. And without a doubt, Henry certainly didn't have any sort of restraint from his sentiments. And if he felt it, he did it.
Well, most victims of narcissists aren't necessarily narcissists themselves, and they naturally, as a consequence of the erosion of their emotional empathy, would, no doubt, have had thoughts of, oh, I would just wish this person to go under a bus. I wish I could kill them. In some instances, you do get rare instances where that individual's pushed so far that they strike back and they murder their abuser. It does happen, although it is
Right.
comparatively rare. Those that would like to do something about it ultimately don't. It just remains a thought in their head. The
Right.
difference, of course, is that you had a different personality type dealing in respect of Henry VIII, and the fact that he was king and he had the power to remove, if you regard Anne Boleyn as a sort of manipulator and a tormentor, if you
Hmm.
accept that view, he certainly had the power to deal with her that way. Harry,
Harry
he's
doesn't. No, yes,
he's not in
but
a position to order the execution of his wife. But
No.
you accept and see him as very much a victim of a narcissist.
Yes. And the the unfortunate thing for Megzy is that whereas someone such as Amberlynn got with someone with the power to do whatever it is that she influenced him to do, Megzy ended up with despair, and he doesn't have the power to do those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
So she's
Sure.
taking them on.
Okay. Now, as you're aware, she has her supporters, the Sussex Squad, known as the Sugars. Have you had much experience of them?
Not a whole lot. I have had some experiences with them on Twitter, in silly debates with them and whatnot. For the most part, they haven't really bothered me. In fact, it was just, I think, like 2 days ago that I put out a video that I had my first real sugar complaint about. It was someone complaining about one of the videos about Colombia, and her name is Super Stella, and so now she's my.
What was her complaint?
I forget. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was something that she said that I don't know what I'm talking about, and I ought to put more facts in. And it was something
Okay.
about Colombia, which before anybody had any facts about anything, and it wasn't even anything that was a factual thing. Like, I don't even think she watched it. She just looked at the
Title.
thumbnail and just
Yeah.
reacted. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but that's my guess.
I see. So, and have you had a bit of a back and forth with this individual?
No, I of course replied because I enjoy toying with them, but she didn't reply back. Like I said, she probably didn't even watch the video.
No. So your robust response caused her to beat a retreat then.
Yes.
Fair enough. Now, when was your light bulb moment regarding this one's wife and her behavior? When did you first look at it and go, you know what, she's problematic? Can you remember what it was that you saw that made you realize, hang on, this woman's a problem?
No, it was the other way around for me because I knew about her like I learned about her by doing research on Amber Heard, even before the Depp Heard trial. And so I knew Meghan was a narcissist before I knew anything, before I'd taken note of her enough to do that. But I will say that I remember one of the first
How did
things.
you? Sorry to cut across
Yeah,
you.
no problem.
How did you arrive at understanding that she was a narcissist without looking at her behaviors?
No, I learned like as I learned about, like, I would watch one of, say, your videos or one of the body language guys' videos. And so before I really knew the story, I knew you guys were calling her a narcissist. Do you know what I'm saying?
I
So like
see.
I was
Okay.
looking for it before I really paid attention to her enough, other than
I
knowing
see. So
Mary's
basically you
marrying
heard.
this person.
I understand. So you heard the label before you really paid much attention to the way that she was behaving.
Right.
So in effect, you had a preconceived idea of what she was before you actually scrutinized her behavior.
Right. And yet, but here's a good interesting part of that. I remember that the first time that I had watched, it was the body language guy, and I had watched him doing an analysis of the engagement interview. And I remember he was pointing out clenched jaws and she's grabbing his hand. And I was kind of like, come on. I mean, aren't we kind of reaching here? And then, time went on and I got into the story and I got to know her regular behaviors and this and that. And about a month and a half ago or so, I came across that same video again. It popped up in my YouTube feed or whatever. And I watched it, and this time I could remember watching it the first time. And now I'm sitting there saying, "Oh yeah. Oh no, he was spot on." Like, all the things that I thought he was exaggerating, now I can see it and spot it, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, no, he was actually being nice about it." Like, there were 4 more things he could have pointed out.
I see. So you took on board that she was a narcissist and then saw the behaviors later. So there wasn't really any time that you suddenly thought, oh right, yeah, she's problematic. It's just, yeah, I've heard that she's a narcissist and I know that narcissists are problematic.
Right. I would say it was more there was a bit of a light bulb moment when I was watching the Jubilee. I think that there
Hmm.
was a light bulb moment where all the things that I'd been hearing, and then as I watched her walking up the aisle, and I was like, wow, that really is like she really that's not right. Like there was something that all the things kind of fell into place almost, whereas the things that I was learning, actually I started seeing them on my own, if that makes sense. Like I didn't need them pointed out anymore. I could recognize things,
Hmm.
and all the pieces kind of clicked.
I see. Now, as you explained earlier on, you've had personal experience of the impact of a
Hmm.
narcissist in your life in relation to your son. So perhaps you might spend a few moments just explaining what happened there and the impact that it's had on you.
Yeah, sure. So my son had just well, before he, this all kind of blew up. It was post COVID, right? So my
Hmm.
children, when they were going through high school, the first couple years was COVID, and then I would say as a family we kind of got a little less connected to each other because they were getting older, and at the same time they were spending more time on devices. All of us were, because we were in the house. So I would say after COVID ended, I probably wasn't on top of my son's online gaming as I should have been. But by then he's a 16-year-old kid. You kind of, you've already taught them all the things that you thought that they needed to know.
Yeah.
So his during his senior year of high school, apparently he had gotten involved in this online gaming community, and in the process got connected with a 28-year-old woman who essentially convinced him that we all had abused him, and he had been abused and neglected all his life,
Hmm.
and whatever it was, and convinced him to go on a trip to North Carolina with her. Now,
Hmm.
he didn't tell us anything about this until he had asked me permission to go away the same week that he always would go away for the past 10 years prior with his best friend since kindergarten. They would go down to the beach together. And
Yeah.
I know the family, they've always done it. And when my son said, yeah, I'm going to go July 25th or whatever it was, 25th or 26th, I assumed that he was talking about the trip with his best friend. And they're now seniors in high school. I don't need to call the mom, and she'll call me the day before and this and that. And I've known them forever too. So obviously it wasn't as a monitored trip as it would be. They're high school
Yes.
seniors. They just graduated from high school.
Yes.
So, and I knew he was going down, or I thought I knew he was going down to the family home. So the day of that he was supposed to be going, I was about to call the mom, this and that. He stopped me, and some, alarm bells obviously went off. And through a course of strange, wacky events, I find out he's not going down to the beach. He's going down to North Carolina to play games with a bunch of 25 and 28-year-old people. And I'm like,
Mm.
what the heck So there was a big hubbub, and we said, no, 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 you're not going. And turns around, he goes anyway. And the people down there don't know what's going on. And at this point in time, I was so focused on the age that I missed a lot of the signals I should have seen in terms of
Right.
the manipulation and the control, because I'm sitting here thinking she's 28 years old. This is crazy.
Well,
She's
I think in fairness, most people would agree with you that that would be the first thing that most people would go to
right,
would be the age gap and go, this is inappropriate, and
right,
that would be the
exactly.
focus rather than necessarily the behaviours that were manifesting. What were some of those behaviours which you missed at the time that you now recognise were indicative of this individual being a narcissist?
So at the time when he's getting ready to go on this trip and we're saying no, 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 she is driving in from the airport, renting cars, the whole big thing. And I remember I'm sitting out on my front steps waiting for this person to show up. And she drives by, and goes around the block once. And when she comes back the second time, she pulls up, stops in front of my house, and gets out of the car screaming that I am an abusive mother and I shouldn't be allowed near children. And
Okay, what was your reaction to that?
I was like, I didn't even know what to. I was like, what are you talking? Like, what do you mean? And at this point, I was baffled. And, I'm already, my son's getting ready to leave. And I'm like, who are you that you're saying? What are you talking about? And then she turned to my daughter, who's younger than my son, turns to her and says, you need to get in this car too. And then, of course, the mama bear went off the charts. And I'm like, who the hell do you think you are trying to take
Yeah.
my children? And she kept saying over and over again how abusive I was. And I'm
Did
like,
she
where
provide
the
you
heck
with any particularization of this abuse?
No,
There's
no,
no specifics. Okay.
no specifics whatsoever. I mean, she's in the middle of the street screaming at me. And
Yeah.
and I was like, listen, you get back in your car and you get the hell away right now, on the phone to the police. And she left, and the night went on for many, many hours afterwards. And it was when he finally left, and the final thing was, you leave here, you leave your phone, blah, 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 which again, I wouldn't have done had I known in hindsight, but we did get his phone, and he left his phone here. And when he left his phone, we started going through all the texts and all the discords. And that's when I saw, I read what she said. I read, and I would hear, I read him say, like, a situation I was in, that I was there, that I know what really happened. And then she would turn it around and say, oh, well, that's abusive. Oh, your sister's a manipulative little slut. Oh, your sister's playing your mom and making your mom be mad at you. And I'm like,
So
what?
he was describing events in family life, and then she was
Right.
putting a spin on it. So
Yep.
give me an example. Give me an example.
So
What was he writing?
one example was, he had a bathroom all to himself. This was his bathroom. He's the only one that used it. Since he was 16 years old, the assumption was, it's your bathroom, you're the only one in it, you clean your bathroom. Well, at one point in time, I walked into his bathroom and it had not been cleaned in at least 2 months. And I flipped out. I'm like, what are you kidding me? You're not going out with your friends until you clean this bathroom. Well, I read that in the chat thread where he said, my mom won't let me do anything until I clean the bathroom. She's making me clean the bathroom. Why doesn't she clean the bathroom? And I read her, which is I mean, he's a 19-year-old, he's an 18-year-old kid,
Oh,
what he was
absolutely.
saying.
Typical complaint. Yeah.
Exactly. And then her response was, and remember, so she's also older than him, so he assumes she knows what she's talking about. Oh, no mother would ever do that. That's horrible. You should never be expected to do the chores. Why can't she clean the bathroom? And that's when, like, later in hindsight, also knowing that after this happened, he kept saying to me, well, why don't you do it? And I'm like, what do you want? All of a sudden, 2 years you cleaned your bathroom and now this? And that's what it was. It was he was parroting back what she was saying to him, which I didn't
Yes,
know.
I see.
Yeah. And
So
he became impossible.
so each time he was in effect being groomed and influenced by her,
Hmm.
so that when he would talk about the usual vagaries of teenage life and the complaints of living under your roof, which many
Hmm.
teenagers would, she utilized that to basically plant the seed in his head. That's abuse.
Exactly.
And he
Exactly.
swallowed that.
And he swallowed it. And then
Yeah. And
he also brought in his
where's
sister
that?
too.
Okay. And so where's that left things with your son now?
I haven't spoken to him in over a year.
Do you have
Haven't
the means
spoken
of
to him.
communicating with him?
No, because he blocked all of our phones. He blocked all of our phones, all of our numbers. He blocked us from all of his accounts. I have no idea
How's
where
that
he
make
is.
how does that make you feel?
It's horrible. It's terrible. And probably the worst part of it is that the same kind of concept of, I don't know what's going to happen when she gets tired of him. And I don't know what he's going to do, because he doesn't talk to any of his high school friends, any of his friends since childhood. He doesn't talk to anyone in any family, cousins, aunts, uncles, no one.
Have you been trying
Absolutely
to
no one.
find out what he's up to by asking around?
We have. And he has a couple friends who he would still take their calls.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, 3 or 4 of his friends, they've since been blocked. Like the 3 or 4 that were still on the fringes, they've since been blocked. Because anytime they say, "Are you okay? Are you sure about this?" They get knocked out of his life too.
What's your
She
plan? What's your plan for dealing with this?
Right now, letting him learn a life lesson the hard way. But
Yeah.
like I said, my fear is, A, what's he going to do when he really has no skills to take care of himself if she kicks him out tomorrow? I mean, that's problem number one. That's fear number one. And fear number two is, what will she make him do?
Well, on the basis that she's a narcissist, we make
Hmm.
that assumption,
Yes.
and he is living with her
Hmm.
and is thus the intimate partner primary source.
Hmm.
That means that it's likely. How long has their relationship been going on for now?
I guess a year and a half is the best guess we have, best guesstimate,
Okay.
because we don't know exactly when it
So
started.
they might still be in the golden period, so everything's
Hmm.
hunky dory. But devaluation beckons, as it always does.
Yes.
So she'll start to treat him badly, and there's lots of different ways, as you know from my work, that will happen.
Yeah.
And then it's a case of, at what juncture does he start to realize, hang on a second, I'm being abused? And then what is his response to that?
Hmm.
The most likely response would that he would come running back to you.
We like to think that.
Yeah, but it's a question of when that happens,
Yeah.
because it could take him a long time before he actually realizes what it is that he's dealing with. In fact, many victims, of course, would try and repair the damage, don't understand why it's gone wrong, bends over backwards to try and appease her, make everything right
Yes.
again, get back to the wonderful golden period. So he stays locked into the relationship still.
Hmm.
And it might be, of course, that she disengages from him. So she ends the relationship, and then he's left with, well, do I go back and kind of face the music? He may well be
Hmm.
ashamed of what's happened, too embarrassed to admit that it's ended, and therefore stays away. Or it might prove the catalyst for him to come back and say, it's over. I don't understand what's happened. Help me make sense of it. But
Yeah.
you don't see any scope for intervening at this juncture.
When it first went down, and this is another reason that I am pretty sure that she has the ability to manipulate any situation, no matter what. So when it first happened, I called and had the local police where she lives do a wellness check. And I was on the phone
Yes.
with the police and spoke to them, and, had a wonderful conversation. They felt, obviously very terrible. They were interested in helping. They sent the cop out, and the cop called me back with anger and saying, "Why are you doing this?" I'm like, "What?"
Hmm.
And he said, Why aren't you letting this, he's a grown man. He's
Hmm.
19." And all I could imagine were whatever it was that she was telling the police about what happened, what had went down, and the story that they met. I mean, for all the police knew, she was telling the truth, and I'm a lunatic,
Yeah. Yeah.
who's abusing and trying to re-kidnap my own son. I don't know, whatever it is she would say.
Hmm.
But the fact that the police that I spoke to, who were totally understanding about what it was that I would be doing, compared to the cop who was like, "I don't even understand why you're doing this." I was like,
Yeah. So
"Oh, okay."
she'd managed to influence that police officer to think
Yep.
that you're the problem, which is of course common in the way
Yep.
that a narcissist will manipulate, so that she's the victim and she paints you as the perpetrator.
Mhm.
And on this occasion, the policeman has been hoodwinked by that to believe that you
Yep.
are the problem. Yeah.
And then the second time I did it, the cop that went out wouldn't tell me anything. And again, I have a perfectly reasonable conversation talking to the dispatcher or whoever it is. And this was
Yeah.
like a month later. And then the cop calls me back. The second cop wouldn't tell me a word. Well, my son's father called the cops the next day. The dispatch spoke to the dispatch. They told him everything. The cop wouldn't even tell me if he was alive. He said, I'm not telling you anything. And I said, but I'm calling for a wellness check. Isn't the purpose of a wellness check that you tell me everything's well? He's like, I'm not telling you anything. I said, can you do that? I mean, isn't that kind of what this is intended to be? And he would not tell me anything. Father calls the next day. He found out he's fine. Everything's okay. And that's it. And because he's over 18, they can't tell us much more. But
No.
the fact that they wouldn't even tell me that he was alive. I can just imagine what the woman told the cops.
So you see a clear parallel between the way that your son's been influenced by this woman and the way that Harry's been influenced by this one's wife.
Yes, I can't imagine that Harry was was unloved to the level that he believes he is now without her telling him. Like, I believe most of that book Spare is her version of his life, even though she
Yes,
wasn't
I
there.
agree. I agree with you. Given the clear parallels between what's happened to your son, which naturally is both upsetting and frustrating for you, and what you see going on between Harry and this one's wife, you earlier mentioned that you sort of transfer your observations from the situation of your son to that of this one's wife. What about the suggestion that you're torturing yourself, that you've got this unpleasant situation involving your son? I think anybody listening would agree that that's an awful situation to be placed in. And thus, by watching it play out in a royal setting or a quasi-royal setting, are you not torturing yourself?
No, because I'd still be worrying about my son, and at least this distracts me. And so, it gives me that same focus that I would put in worrying about my son. I get to sideline some of it, take a right turn with some of it. And the other thing, and this is actually me learning about the story more and sharing it a little bit more with my daughter as well. Honestly, sometimes it gives me strength to deal with it, to see, I mean, I'm sure the royal family, the last thing that they want is for the whole world to know this personal part of their lives, obviously. I'm sure they're horrified by it and wish that it wasn't the case. And yet, the reality is that watching other people that, are kind of somewhat role models, seeing them go through it, it makes you feel less alone, and it gives you the strength to keep fighting, the fight that you fight. And honestly, my daughter, I, out of the blue, like a month or so ago, and I mean, we don't talk about it that much at home. I don't talk about the Harry and Meghan stuff much at home. But so for her about a month ago to say something about, oh yeah, Prince William, I saw he went to, I think it was the Taylor Swift concert maybe. And even the fact that she would take note of it and say it to me, it means she's watching him, if that makes sense. And she's watching how he deals with it. And I do think that resonates with her as well.
Okay. With regard to the situation concerning your son, it's very much up in the air as where it goes to vis-a-vis his return to you. Naturally, you'll understand the dynamic that takes place between him and her, that either he might escape her, unlikely, more likely she'll disengage from him, or it'll just trundle along, being the roller coaster for years to go. Given the close parallels between that situation and that of Harry and this one's wife, where do you think Harry and this one's wife will end up?
I used to say that she was, he was just a stepping stone for her to get to something else. But the more things play out, I'm starting to see them trundling along a lot longer than anybody thinks.
Why do you think that is?
Because I don't see her getting her better dude. I don't see her upgrading.
Yeah.
I think that that she's pretty well known for what she is at this point. even the people that don't know she's a narcissist, or even the people that don't know all of her shenanigans in the US, I mean, they're still pretty known to have, they're kind of a joke. Nobody
Yeah.
nobody necessarily considers them evil or anything like that, like I do. Um, but they're known to be a joke, and I think her getting that upgrade is going to take her a little bit of time, if it's possible at all.
Okay. Okay. What do you think their bedroom routine is? It's dusk at Monty Shit Show. But, sun's gone down, and another day is coming to its conclusion. What do you think's going on in that mansion with regard to their bedtime routine?
I think that she has a glass of wine in one hand and her phone in the other, and
Mhm.
she's going through yelling at Harry for all the things that she sees that she doesn't like, whether it's the tweets or the videos or whatever, or the bad headlines. She's just ranting to him. That's what I
So,
see.
another one that sees that she engages in the rage scrolling, but this time with
Oh,
a
yes.
glass of wine in hand. And
Yeah.
what's Harry's response as his handler's rage scrolling?
I think he's just saying, I can fix this. I can fix this. And he plans on throwing money at the problem again
Okay.
until he can't anymore.
Yeah.
And
When this one's
whether it's, getting another puff piece out there, we'll get so and so to write something else.
Hmm.
Something.
Do you not think he's become tired of it, assuming she does this regularly?
Oh, I would have thought he would have become tired of it before they ever left the UK, but he hasn't yet.
Right.
Yeah, I think he's just too beaten down to be tired of it because he has
Mm.
nothing else. He
Yeah.
has nothing else but her.
Yeah.
So he's
When this
incented to
one's
make it work.
wife, when this one's wife pops into the shower, what's the first thing she washes?
Oh, she's furiously trying to wash that stench of failure off of her skin, isn't she?
Good answer.
I mean,
And
furiously.
while she's in the shower,
Yeah.
furiously trying to remove the stench of failure, Harry's hiding in one of the other 45,000 flushing toileted bathrooms, and
Yes.
he's sat on the crapper. What's going through Harry's mind at that point?
Oh, he's sitting there playing some sort of, what are those the candy shop games or whatever it's called.
Candy Crush on his phone.
Right, yes, because it's the only quiet time he gets.
That's his escape
Yeah.
from his imprisonment.
As far as
Yeah.
she knows, he's constipated because he spends a lot of time in there.
Her paranoia will probably think that he's engaging in a bit of onanism, thinking about
Right.
his sister-in-law, I should imagine. But yeah, the alternative is that things aren't moving
Yeah.
moving along in the Harry department. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for sharing your observations about the gruesome twosome and also your personal circumstances.
Oh, it was
That's
my pleasure.
particularly interesting. Only remains one more thing to do before this
Okay.
conversation concludes, and that, of course, is a game of this or that.
All
I'm going
right.
to give you particular alternatives. You can't refuse to answer. You can't say neither. You have to make a choice. You
Okay.
can put it in whatever context you want in your mind, but you don't need to explain your answer. You just need to give me the choice. Okay?
Okay. Very good.
All right. Okay. Dusk or dawn?
Dusk.
Short or tall?
Tall.
Hard.
Whoop. I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit there.
Hard or soft?
Soft.
Unicorn or dragon?
Oh, dragon.
Christian Bale or Hugh Jackman?
Hugh Jackman.
Fresh linen or fresh coffee?
Oh, fresh linen. Nice and
Mountain,
crisp.
mountain or beach?
Mountain.
Friends or family?
Family.
Red or blue?
Blue.
Laptop or tablet?
Laptop.
Dry Driver or passenger?
Passenger.
House or apartment?
House.
Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings?
Harry Potter.
Jason Bourne or James Bond?
Ooh, James Bond.
Roses or lilies?
Lilies.
Meryl Streep or Jodie Foster?
Ooh, tough one. Meryl Streep.
Titanic or Ghost?
Titanic.
No sense of smell or no sense of style?
Mm. No sense of smell.
Spring or fall?
Fall.
Gold or diamond?
Diamond.
Wasps or bees?
Bees.
Sparkling or still?
Still.
Frasier or Seinfeld?
Seinfeld.
Homer or Bart?
Bart.
Saturday or Sunday?
Saturday.
The book or the film adaptation?
The book is always better.
Prince William or Loose Cannon Louis?
Loose Cannon Louis.
Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh or Princess Anne?
Ooh. Anne.
Harry or This One's Wife?
This one's wife.
I don't think I caught your answer then. It might have just broken up.
This one's wife.
This one's wife. Thank you. Okay. This one's wife or Prince Andrew?
Ooh. Prince Andrew.
Being this one's wife's podiatrist or this one's wife's spray tanner?
Spray tan.
And finally, spending an entire day doing what this one's wife wants or never making a video about her ever again?
Oh, I'd spend the day with her.
There we are. Recollections of Our Recollections May Vary. Thank you very much for your time and your observations. You have just had your conversation with the Ultra.
Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Not at all. Not at all.